Welcome to Sleep Time, where I read short stories that hopefully calm your mind a little bit. Born Scared by Kevin Brooks. Chapter 1, Christmas Eve. I'm as far as the hallway now. Coat, hat, boots, gloves. Cold sweat running down my back. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Christmas Eve. The snowstorm's getting worse. My heart's pounding. I'm shaking, shivering. I feel sick. And every cell in my body is screaming at me to turn around and run. But I can't move. Either way, I can't go back. Can't go out. I can't do it. It's impossible. I can't go out there. I'm terrified. Chapter 2. Less than nothing. My fear pills are yellow, which isn't a bad color for me. Red is blood and Santa's. Black is death. Blue is the drowning sea. Yellow is cheese and bananas and pills. I don't know why I call them fear pills. They're anti-fear pills, really. I'm chronically afraid of almost everything. Sometimes, I think I can remember being scared when I was still in my mother's womb. It's not much more than a distant feeling, really, and I have no idea what I could have been frightened of in there, or how, in my informed state, I could have even perceived it. Unless, it's probably more accurate to say that I sometimes think I can remember being scared when we were still in our mother's womb. There were 2 of us in there, me and my sister, Ella. We were twins, and I know in my heart that in my embryonic fears, if that's what they were as much Ella as they were mine. We were scared, together. We were as one, as we still are now. And perhaps we knew what was coming. Perhaps we were frightened because we knew one of us was dying. No, I don't think that's it. I don't think any of us knows what death is until it's explained to us. And the strange thing about that is that although there must be a pivotal moment all our lives when we find out for the first time that all living things die, and that at some point in the future our own life will come to an end, I certainly can't remember the moment when I found out, and I'd be surprised if anyone else can either. Which is kind of weird, don't you think? What I can remember, though, is the effect that moment had on me. I don't know how old I was at the time, 4, 5, 6, but I clearly remember lying in bed at night with my head beneath the covers trying to imagine death. The total absence of everything. No life, no darkness, no light, nothing to see, nothing to feel, nothing to know. No time, no where or when, no nothing. Forever and ever and ever and ever. It was terrifying. It still is. Lying there for hours and hours, staring long and hard into the darkness, searching for that unimaginable emptiness. But all I ever see is a vast swath of absolute blackness stretching deep into space for 1,000 million miles, and I know that's not enough. I know that when I die, there'll be no blackness and no 1,000 million miles. There won't even be nothing. There'll be less than nothing. And the thought of that still fills my eyes with tears. But sometimes it feels as if that memory doesn't belong to me, that it happened to someone else. Or maybe I read about it in a book or something. A story about a mixed up kid who lies in bed at night trying to imagine death. And I identified with it so much that over time I gradually convinced myself that I was that mixed up kid, and his imaginations were mine. Not that it makes any difference, I suppose. A memory is a memory, wherever it comes from. I've sunk down to the hallway floor now, and I'm just sitting here with my eyes closed and my back against the wall. I'm trying to breathe steadily, trying to calm my thumping heart, trying to empty my mind. After a while, Ella comes to me, her silent voice as comforting as ever. "It's all right, Elliot. It'll be okay. I'm scared. I know. But you won't be alone. I'll be here with you, all the way. I don't think I can do it." "Yes, you can. It's too much. You have to do it, Elliot." "I know. For Mom. I know. For us." We were born prematurely at 26 weeks. I weighed just under a pound. Ella was even smaller. It was a traumatic birth, and at first the doctors weren't sure if any of us were going to survive. Mom had lost a lot of blood, and it was in a really bad way. And while she was rushed off for an emergency operation, Ella May and I were taken to the neonatal intensive care unit, where we were put in incubators and hooked up to all kinds of stuff to keep us alive. It didn't work for Ella May. She only lived for an hour. I almost went with her. Our hearts stopped beating at virtually the same time. But although the doctors and nurses somehow managed to save me, they couldn't do anything to bring Ella back. Part of me died with her, and part of her lived on with me. We're dead and alive together. The first time I experienced fear in the outside world as opposed to the inner world of my mother's womb was the first time I woke up in the incubator after Ella had died. It's a moment that's as much a part of me as all the other things that make me what I am. My heart, my brain, my flesh, my blood. I was lying there on my back, eyes open, looking up through the clear plastic dome of the incubator at the white sky of the ceiling above. Muted sounds were drifting all around me, soft beeps, hushed voices, a low humming, and although I didn't know what these noises were, I wasn't scared of them. They were the sounds of my world, as normal to me as the sound of my own stuttered breathing. Then, all at once, everything changed. The white sky suddenly darkened as three unknown things appeared out of nowhere and loomed down over me. I didn't know what they were. Moving things, menacing things, things that made strange blabbering noises. Monsters. Then one of them moved even closer to me, stooping down over the incubator, getting bigger and bigger all the time. And that was when the fear erupted inside me. It was uncontrollable, overwhelming, absolute, pure terror. It was all I was. The three unknown things that day were my mom, her older sister Shirley, and Dr. Gibson. And the funny, peculiar thing about that is that although they were the first people to scare me to death, they've since become the only three people who don't scare me to death. They are to me the only true people in the world. Everyone else is a monk. Chapter 3. Cheap and Nasty. The two men in the stolen Land Rover were both dressed as Santa Claus. The Santa disguises had been a last-minute decision, and because it was Christmas Eve, most of the local shops and costume rental places had run out of Santa suits. The only store that hadn't sold out was the Pound Crusher at the retail park in Catterick, and the only reason they had any left was that their costumes were so cheap and nasty that the Scrooge himself wouldn't have bought one. The red nylon they were made from was so thin it was virtually see-through, and the stringy white trim on the hats and jackets was glued on rather than stitched. Parts of the trim were already falling off, the loose white thread sticking to the static cling of the flimsy red nylon like dandruff. Both of the costumes were XXL, the only size left in the shop, and since neither of the two men were anywhere near extra large, they'd had to make some rough and ready adjustments to their outfits. Extra holes had been made in the belts, sleeves, and pant legs were rolled up, and the Santa hats had been made to fit by wearing beanie hats underneath. The costumes didn't include Santa boots, so both men were wearing sneakers. Chapter 4. So many other things. The worst time for Mom was the first couple of years of my life, when all I did was scream and cry almost constantly. People kept telling her not to worry. It's perfectly normal for babies to cry all the time. But she knew this was different. I wasn't just crying like a normal baby. I was bawling and howling, trembling all over, cowering away from just about everything. "It's not right, is it?" Mom said to Dr. Gibson. "There's something seriously wrong with him." The doc looked at me. I was cradled in Mom's arms, then turned back to Mom. "I don't know what it is, Grace. I honestly don't. The only irregularities that have shown up on his regular hospital checkups are a faster than average heart rate and high blood pressure. But considering the trauma he went through at birth, it's perfectly understandable for him to have an instinctive fear of the hospital environment. But his heart rate and blood pressure go up when you're examining him too, Mom pointed out. Not as much as when he's at the hospital. And again, it's only natural for him to be scared of me when he knows I'm going to be prodding him and sticking needles in him. No, Mom said firmly, shaking her head. There's more to it than that. I could understand if he only got upset and agitated when he's being examined, but there are so many other things that bring it on too. Unfamiliar people, strange sounds, cars, birds, dogs, rain, wind, darkness. He's terrified of the dark, Owen. I mean, he's not just frightened of it. I could understand that. He's absolutely petrified of it. He's never once slept without a light on. The doc frowned and scratched his head. Well, physically, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with him. As I said, the hospital checkups have all been clear, and you know yourself that I've been testing him for everything I can possibly think of. Heart, liver, blood, allergies, infections, and I haven't found anything out of the ordinary. He paused, hesitating for a second, glancing at me again. The only thing I can think of at the moment is that the underlying cause of his extreme agitation isn't directly physical. What do you mean? The symptoms we've been talking about, increased heart rate, high blood pressure, are classic indicators of fear and anxiety, and while I still think it's fairly normal for Elliot to have an instinctive fear of the hospital, and to a lesser extent me, it's possible that his problems have a psychological bias rather than a specific physical cause. Mom's face visibly paled. It's not uncommon, Grace, the doc said, putting a reassuring hand on her arm. Small babies have all kinds of curious problems, and sometimes we simply don't know what's wrong with them. And of course, they can't tell us anything themselves until they start talking. But in my experience, by the time they do start talking, the vast majority of them have left these problems behind. The vast majority, Mom said, raising her eyebrow. Elliot's going to be fine, Grace, the doctor said softly. Trust me, everything's going to be fine. Everything wasn't fine, though. I didn't leave my problems behind, and by the time I was talking well enough to express my feelings, there was no doubt what was wrong with me. I'm scared, Mommy. Scared of what, though? Everything.